I'm usually a little critical of these T-series phones, but maybe this one makes a bit more sense. Hey there, this episode of Some Gadget Guy is brought to you by viewers like you. All of the incredible people sharing content across social media and the generosity of my patrons at patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. More info on those awesome nerds later in the video. Yeah, the folks at Xiaomi sent this my way to test drive, review, share some thoughts. This is the Xiaomi 17T, co-engineered with Leica. A T-series phone. This is their mid-season replacement with your favorite Google apps. I've historically been very critical of T-series phones and just some of the confusion that can arise when we've got multiple lines of phones, multiple numbers, Xiaomi 17, 17 Pro, Max, Element OP, Ultras, and now T-series seems to me, and someone please correct me in the comments if I have maybe this a little off, but a lot of the T-series phones from Xiaomi seem to be their MediaTek variants. Maybe there's a little less these days separating a regular Xiaomi 17 from a 17T. You let me know. Kicking off immediately with the design, this is very conservative, very understood design language for a phone in 2026. It's pretty iPhone-y. Flat sides, flat front, flat back, Cadillac, the boys a time bomb. Same rounded corners we've come to expect. Here we've got an island of camera sensors. The camera sensors here are actually pretty fun to talk about. We're gonna cover that in just a bit. Square with circles, we typically look at that and think, it's kind of an iPhone look. And here's another one that I'll put out there. I actually kind of prefer having one unified island that is not all glass as opposed to the individual circles that we've seen on previous Xiaomi, but I'm really splitting hairs there. I don't think anyone's gonna look at this phone from a distance and think, oh, what an interesting Xiaomi device. I think especially you pop a case on this and a lot of folks are gonna go, I wonder what kind of iPhone that is. We know this design, we know this form factor, this is very well understood. We've got speakers and here's a little SIM card tray here on the bottom. I don't know how critical it is for folks out there. I don't like it when our little LED flash is under the camera sensors, especially when we think about how far under the camera sensors that this is gonna be. But I try not to use the flash too much on my photos anyway. All right, the front face here, we've got a 6.59-inch AMOLED up to 120 hertz. Big certifications here from Xiaomi, really looking at eye care, professionally certified for eye care, reading modes, blue light filtering, flicker-free demonstrations. Actually, that's another one too. I've had difficulty trying to get like really good high shutter speed video to show this off, and I might just try a couple photo samples, see if that works. But for folks who are sensitive to that kind of flicker, where I've not been particularly affected by PWM flickering, you let me know, like, what is something that would show you better if that's a device that would meet your needs. We've got a very low-mounted optical fingerprint sensor. This is one of those where a lot of mid-rangers, I've been excited to see those new ultrasonic fingerprint sensors. I kind of wish we had that here, if only just so that my thumb didn't have to reach to the bottom of this screen. This is not a super large screen, but I also have a pretty small hobbit stumpy thumb, so it kind of balances out. I like it better when we can kind of reach to the middle of the phone screen. It's less of a reach, like I'm dancing the phone around in my hand. I gotta say, for a lot of these phones, especially the T-series, the speakers and multimedia playback have been sounding pretty good to my ears. Let's take a listen. Software on tap, we've got HyperOS. This is very familiar territory here too. I think a lot of the manufacturers have been looking at ways to really bump up the AI messaging when really I don't know that that's moving the needle with consumers. I don't think anyone's really been shopping phones out there so fixated on what the AI in their device can do. This is a fast, fluid interface, though I do kind of feel that Xiaomi has fallen a little behind Oxygen OS and Color OS for some of the more fun, bouncy, playful animations and wallpaper effects. I do like that we're playing with gestures. There's the new multitasking layout here. That's kind of nice, going with these lateral panels. You have a choice, and during setup, you can go with lateral panels or that kind of grid vertical arrangement that they used to use. I like that we've got this gesture here. We can slide up and you'll see it'll lock in that little floating window icon. I wish we had the split. So on Oxygen OS or Color OS, you can go either side, go split screen or go with the floating window. Here we lock in right there. We can kind of move this around, tap into it. It's a nice solution where I feel Android really should be trying to evolve into a more desktop-like operating system. Here's the phone UI where you can have one app floating like that. I think that's pretty handy. So if I scroll up from the multitasking view, we can long press, get other options here if we want to split screen, lock an app in place. Of course, we've got some AI stuff there. That's pretty nifty. I've left this pretty much how we've seen it out of the box. And you've got the Gemini icon right here, but I did want to scroll through settings here real quick because we have Xiaomi Hyper AI. So we've got this right here. Gemini is like the main sort of phone assistant AI, but then we can see some of the other tools that Xiaomi's been working on: dynamic wallpapers, writing tools, creativity assistant for editing photos and videos, speech recognition, translation, interpreter, subtitles. These are all individual things that also Google is working on too. So like when you're talking about near real-time subtitles, obviously that's a feature that we saw on Pixels. We're seeing every company try to approach these types of usage scenarios. Whether or not we're all game to say, oh, I am using so much AI, these are the natural evolutions of the little apps and services that we all used to just watch, like Google Translate, subtitle effects. Do you have an editing app in your photo gallery? Well, now that editing app has all kinds of AI. So I come into the photo gallery, I click on edit, and here are all these adjustment tools. I can AI beautify, and I can ultra HD it and radically increase the resolution. And the way that companies are selling AI, do we really feel, or do we really think that this is what consumers are thinking of when we're touting artificial intelligence? We can do very traditional editing, or we can go in and AI beautify. It's beautifying the photo with the magic of artificial intelligence. So one thing I'll say is kind of interesting and an omission that I'm sort of surprised to see. I like it when we come up with gestures and we have a consistent way of doing things. And on a lot of phones now, you long press on a subject and it'll start to do something like scan the subject of your photo and separate it from the background. And I'm messing around with this photo gallery app and it's not giving me those kinds of tools here. I liked that feature a lot where you could quickly cut something out of a photo. It would preserve a transparency effect behind your subject. And now that seems to be gone. So does that mean our phone is a little less AI when we lose some features like that? I don't know. You let me know. Is that something that you ever used? It was something I liked on my phone. I haven't been mentioning in a lot of videos recently, but there is a fair amount of value-added pre-installed software. AliExpress, Amazon Music, Facebook, LinkedIn, Netflix, whether or not these are services you use, TikTok, WPS Office. There's a little bit of pruning that you've got to do, but I feel like one of the benefits of so many services just being built into Android and then individual plugins and services being built into the operating system, there's been a little less push to have multiple apps pre-installed, all replicating different little bits of functionality. At least some of this has been cleaned a bit, though I still will go through all of this and scrub out things that I don't use. Now, when we get into hardware and the performance on this device, I am very happy to be playing with another Dimensity chipset coming in here just to talk about the SoC. Now, this is kind of funny, and I've had this happen on other pre-release software, pre-release ROMs. This identifies itself as a Dimensity 8400, and that is not accurate. Xiaomi lists this as having the Dimensity 8500 Ultra, and of course there's going to be a 17T Pro, which has the Dimensity 9500. I really like the 8500. This little chip is a punchy upper mid-ranger or lower premium kind of chip. We're not gonna quite deliver the same CPU scores that we might get out of, say, Snapdragon 8 Gen 5 non-elite, but we're pulling some real big GPU scores for something that, again, should be an upper mid-ranger experience. This is sort of blurring that transition. With so much focus on those cameras, it is kind of reassuring to know that we can always just come in and start dropping video files on a timeline in an app like LumaFusion. It gives us a little more capability where we can process a bunch of video clips and maybe cut up a little short home family movie on the go and know that the processing power power on this phone is going to go a long way. There's something about an all big core design, and especially the way that MediaTek's been doing it, where this phone is pulling numbers really close to higher tier Qualcomm chipsets. There are some apps that really love multiple bigger cores. Like maybe they were developed for iOS first, and Apple of course uses that 2 big core CPU strategy. The performance here has been excellent for achieving that kind of run and gun on the go. Let me clip this up. Maybe I want to shoot a short or a reel. I really like knowing I can finish those kinds of projects quickly. These are all 4K 60 video files. I really like knowing that I can finish those projects immediately on the device. I don't have to wait, go home and get a laptop. What's kind of funny though is that this chip has been scoring consistently poorly. The other 84 and 8500 series chips that I've used for file compression, that doesn't sound like the sexiest topic. Ooh, you can squish files into a RAR, but these numbers are a little poor. Now, why would we care about file compression? This is that task that your phone does when it optimizes a photo or a video before you attach it to a message. These numbers are a little low. It's also how we approach unpacking larger models and files for AI. So if you've got an on-device edge AI situation, we want to be able to load RAM very, very quickly, unpack a model, work through that data, close it all back up again. These are the numbers that kind of get in our way just a little bit. Of course, we got to talk a little about some gaming. I'm not running a comprehensive gaming benchmark suite right now. And it's interesting because the 8500 I would not put up there as like one of the top options you should consider if you were wanting to play some games. The GPU is actually a punchy little bugger that helps this thing just eke out a few wins against phones with the 8 Gen 5, as I mentioned before. So I've been running Tomb Raider 2013. This isn't a new game, it's from 2013. But what I like is that the most recent update to the Android port for Tomb Raider is now allowing us to raise frame rate. So we have new graphics options, and I keep the phones in graphics mode to try and keep the prettiest presentation of the game. I enable all the eye candy, motion blur, all that fun stuff. There is a benchmark which shows us really good numbers here, averaging over 100 frames per second in Tomb Raider 2013. And in real world gameplay, I was staying well above 80 frames per second, even with other characters on screen and fire effects through the intro of the game. This is a delightful experience. Again, if you've never played Tomb Raider, you should totally play Tomb Raider. But it's one of those games where we brought over a console, a PC port, and this is so much more fun than a lot of what gets sold as a mobile game. We're turning more and more to PC and console games to kind of fulfill that gaming experience. I have high expectations that we're going to do well whenever we want to play games on a device like this, as PC and console emulation improve. Again, where I can more directly load games directly from Steam, the PC flavors of games, and play them through emulation. This is actually going to do us really well, as we've been seeing more support for MediaTek chips in that space. I just gotta say, like, it is wild to me that I've got a computer that can live in my pocket that can play Tomb Raider 2013 well above 60 frames per second without completely obliterating the battery. And when that game was brand new, you know, over 12 years ago, when we first started playing Tomb Raider, we were all just so impressed. Oh, the return of Lara Croft, and look at these graphics. And man, if you had a console that could really drive it consistently at 30 frames per second, that was pretty hot. And now here's an upper mid-ranger, lower premium tier phone easily besting that. That's lovely. I really love to see it. All right, pardon this as just like a boring layout, but I did want to go through the Xiaomi camera app really quick. I keep a really lean camera interface. I've got the Pro mode where I can flip into Pro Video. I have the regular video just because I might want to shoot something off the cuff, and then just the basic photography mode. I really like on Xiaomi, and I wish more manufacturers did this layout, you swipe up for this panel as opposed to having to scroll all the way across your list. At any time, if you have a bunch of these, because you can customize your layout here, you can always scroll up and get to other parts of the camera app. Now, for a very camera-focused device, this app is a little lean. I think what Xiaomi is trying to do is minimize the number of times features might get replicated. So for example, if I want like an action snapshot mode, I have a little guy up here running in the auto mode, motion capture on. So this should tighten up the frame rate, freeze movement, make it just a little bit more crisp. It is not a standalone mode down in here. Now, I just recently published a tour on the Vivo camera app where sometimes these little applets can get a bit obtuse. They can be hidden in other menus, so maybe you would want to know you've got a snapshot or a motion mode in the main settings. Xiaomi isn't doing that. They're really trying to combine extra features into the main auto. Your main auto gets a little bit busier. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. There is no dedicated night mode. Vivo is using night and landscape mode that you can really control, really punch up the processing on those kinds of images. Xiaomi, you have to wait until it gets dark. You'll see a little moon icon, and then you get the feature there. We have to tap in little things like there's this teeny little caret. I don't love that getting to filters is this teeny little target right there. I don't love it when we clutter our viewfinder. I'm happy that there's not a filters on the viewfinder, but I've got to nail that. And then I can swipe through these different sort of preset processing modes. There's a silhouette mode, a stage mode, a flames mode. I don't love lots of modes, but again, if you want to work quickly and you have an expectation that like someone's backlit by a sunset, if you know to tap in here, you can scroll over to the silhouette, shoot that, then bring it back, clear the scene mode, and get back into a regular auto. I do like that we've got basic exposure control where I can just lock underexposing. I think most phones kind of overexpose, and especially the more we hit with HDR, I'd prefer going a third under. Well, now I can just do that immediately. You'll see it right there. It says I'm a third under, and I can just leave it that way. And I don't have to constantly tap and then scroll to drop, the exposure. I can just say, hey, expose this a little darker. Got that top panel up here where we can really get into other features. If we want 50 megapixel resolution, we can jump in right here. We've got pretty good sensors considering where this phone is targeting. The super macro mode does a lot of heavy-handed image processing. I'm not a huge fan of that, but we do have a telephoto where if we use the 10x zoom from the telephoto, we can clear some pretty nice close-up photos, some pretty nice macro shots. Now, this phone isn't quite a photography master. Older numbered Xiaomis will probably best this just all around in terms of camera sensor technology and in camera app functionality. Like if you could get your hands on a Xiaomi 14 non-pro, non-ultra, I think you'd actually have a better camera and processing experience than what we have here on the 17T. We've got a pretty normal main camera sensor that's an OmniVision. OmniVision has been putting out great hardware, but it's a smaller image sensor, closer to a 1/1.55 inch type sensor. But then we've got an adorable little telephoto as well. Again, we've got a 5x telephoto zoom, and it for the materials, the reviewer guide that was sent along with this phone, Xiaomi is really hyping up. This is a smaller sensor, but it's got a longer zoom, longer reach telephoto. And then we've got a good-ish ultra wide that I think is kind of fine. But of the three sensors, the ultra wide is definitely the lowest performing sensor of the three. And you can see clear differences in color and tone and processing when you shoot from the ultra wide and then you switch back to the main sensor. One last little toggle that I really like, being able to quickly adjust if we want a vibrant look or a more photography kind of look, muted color space, but I don't love the vignetting that Xiaomi will bake into the photos in Leica Authentic, but I really like the color processing. It does give the photos a sort of more earnest or a more grounded look without everything being hyper bright or unicorn pukey HDR. I will complain though that when we're in video, it does the thing I don't like. I do not like it when a camera will give you an option on a sensor that the sensor really can't support. So I like to lock all of my cameras to 4K 60. I like shooting 60 frames per second. Maybe I'll finish off in 30 frames per second, have an option to do a half speed, sort of speed ramp or slow motion. But if you notice, all of my camera sensors are active down here in the toggle. But if I go to my ultra wide, while I'm really happy, this is not such a cheap sensor that it can't shoot 4K, it can't shoot 4K 60. So if I'm quickly trying to just jump between different sensors and I switch to the ultra wide and I'm not paying attention, I just kicked my frame rate from 30 to 60. Now let's say, oh, maybe I did that accidentally and let me switch it back to 60. And when I do that, it moves me over to the main camera sensor. I don't like this. When I lock in frame rate and resolution, I think I should only be able to select sensors that support both frame rate and resolution. I don't like it when we're playing this game of bouncing me around different sensors, different modes. It starts changing frame rate, stuff like that. That's really annoying. But on the main sensor and on the telephoto, we do have 4K 60, and the video looks pretty good. I'm actually very impressed with Xiaomi's stabilization in video for both the main sensor and the telephoto. This is really aggressively stabilized video. Sometimes that can introduce some frame tearing or some judder, some shifting elements because there's so much software processing going on. But for something that's focused on photography, I think you're gonna see a lot of folks will like, I can move around quite a bit, and the phone is doing a very good job in stabilizing my movements. I guess one of the things is with Xiaomi's reputation in camera sensor technology, they've worked with Sony to develop some of the most bleeding edge sensors on the market. They've worked with OmniVision to develop some of the most bleeding edge sensors on the market. This feels really mainstream. The 17T I don't think is supposed to be the most impressivist camera solution on the market. So we don't get a processed RAW, we just have regular RAW and JPEG. We don't get a lot of the expanded features that often a camera-centric phone will come with in the additional modes and settings and options. And the camera sensors themselves are good, but they're kind of just gonna run right up against maybe an iPhone non-Pro, a Galaxy S26 non-Ultra. The telephoto is definitely better than what's on a Galaxy. There is no telephoto on an iPhone. That is better. I'm glad we have that 5 times processing, that 5 times zoom camera sensor here. But like I said before, this phone actually faces some pretty steep competition. You could go with a Vivo V series. I think those camera sensors would probably pace this, or you might be able to find a good deal on a 2-generation old Xiaomi phone, non-Pro, non-Ultra, and I think those camera sensors would give the 17 a very healthy run for their money. I'm always gonna be a big fan of a phone that shows up in the chunky box. We like the big, thick box. And the review unit that was sent to me, again, depending on regions, this might be a little bit different, but the phone came with a pre-applied screen protector. You can kind of feel it right there on the selfie camera. It also came with a very dull case. This is another thing that I'll shout out Vivo's recently, the X300 FE, the Vivo V series phones. They come with a case that kind of better complements the color scheme. Now, I just have a plain gray. This is a very simple looking phone, and the case contributes to that. It looks very similar to the simple looking phone. But for other color options, I wish Xiaomi would start including cases that better matched the color of the phone. But I can't fault Xiaomi because this phone has fast charging. And while we don't have the absolute fastest charging brick in the box, we do get a 67-watt charger included with the phone. I don't think it is fun at all. I've given up doing unboxing videos for things like, especially for Samsung and Apple, is you take the phone out of this teeny little sleeve of a box and then you're like, okay, cool, done. You've got to go buy accessories now. If the phone supports fast charging, here the fast charger is included with the price of the phone. People will complain, oh, it's got a USB-A. What is this, 2005? But you know what? I don't care. I'll plug the included cable into this, leave it connected, never worry about it ever again, but I know that this phone is talking to this charger and we're getting pretty quick charging out of this little brick. I will take quality accessories to get me started over nothing for a phone that is probably going to be similarly priced to iPhones and Galaxies that do not offer this same completion of an experience. With a few other little fun bits too. This is a 6,500 milliamp hour battery. This isn't the smallest phone I've ever used, but that's a proper big chunk of battery that will get you through some significant use throughout your day. Probably a 2-day phone, really easy to hypermile as long as you don't go into this all big cord core CPU and leave the performance monster mode on like I do. And I hadn't really seen this listed on a spec sheet before, but I'm sure other phones have supported it. It is kind of cool to see that this supports 22.5 watt reverse charging. So you plug a cable in here and you pop that onto another, say an iPhone, and the massive battery will easily top off an iPhone, especially like an iPhone Air, which has a miserably stupid, skinny, small battery. And you could probably still get a day of use while using this as a power brick for other devices that you might need to charge. No wireless or reverse wireless, anything like that. I will happily just take good, solid fast charging, decently quick reverse fast charging. So it wouldn't be one of my videos if we didn't complain about this situation here. And it's one of the drawbacks that consistently befalls our Xiaomi devices, where we have this amazingly powerful pocket computer. With so much processing power on tap here, I still think this is a terrible tragedy that the USB port does not support video output. Everyone's losing their minds over the MacBook Neo and what a good value the MacBook Neo is. Well, this is a chip that should be able to drive a desktop style interface using Android and Android apps. And even down into silly things like this battery is so big, I would love to be able to plug into something exotic, like these are my Ray Neos. They're little cinema display glasses. I could take an international flight and watch entire seasons of television without having to worry about charging this phone up. So I am yet again begging any manufacturer who's making these phones in mid-ranger, especially in mid-ranger space, we don't need fancy desktop modes on the mostest expensive Samsungs. We need that kind of video output making their way into premium mid-rangers, regular mid-rangers, and even entry-level phones. Should be able to expand the functionality of the processing power here on any kind of external display. This is still such a huge missed opportunity where maybe someone might want to pick up a Pixel A series, even though this phone is demonstrably better than a Pixel A series in every conceivable way, except the Pixel A series can put video out through the USB. The more I make these videos, the crankier I get about that omission. But otherwise, what I think we have here is a T series that makes a little bit more sense to me. I have really struggled with these mid-year replacement phones. Often, I kind of feel like the manufacturer's just using parts in their parts bin to release a new device, and I feel there's a lot of consumer confusion. Well, this is the newest device, it must be the betterer device, when often that's not the case. Often, if there's been a 17 Pro, that 17 Pro is likely better than a 17T Pro. The T kind of represents a different value or bang for buck, or maybe now it's just a different chip. You start the year with Qualcomm, you end the year with MediaTek. I'm not entirely sure. But I will say that this year for the 17 series, while I was so happy to see the 17 Ultra get that global release, I got to go hands-on with that phone. I've got a full camera deep dive on the 17 Ultra on patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. I feel like the different regions that have gotten different flavors of Xiaomi phones, this 17T might make a little more sense this year, since we don't have the full proliferation of 17, 17 Max, 17 Pro, 17 Pro Max, and now we're getting a 17T and a 17T Pro. That's too many phones. But not all of those phones are going to all the same regions in all the same ways. Does this 17T make a little bit more sense given all of the issues that we've got right now with component pricing and distribution? Drop me some comments down below. This is the kind of stuff I really love digging into, because as a mid-ranger phone, I think this phone is really fun. I think this phone is showcasing some good ideas, but it does not exist in a vacuum. So you tell me, where do you place the 17T in this total lineup? Where other phones might be able to compete with it? I would love to hear some chatter, some thoughts down in the comments below this video, because I love getting to dig into this stuff. And the folks who get to see the results of my testing, maybe testing new chips, all my reviewing first, are of course my incredible patrons. All of the folks over on patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. This list of names scrolling by on your screen right now, a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart, as these are the folks that are helping to keep the lights on here in the Gadget Lab. They get all of my videos and reviews in 4K. I will be doing a standalone camera review on the 17T because there are some interesting things happening with this software-hardware combination, and those folks supporting the channel will get to see that video. Those camera deep dives are Patreon exclusives. They're basically the coolest tech pals in the universe, so I hope you'll check them out. I hope you'll consider joining the community at patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. Now, you know where you can find me around the rest of the internet at SomeGadgetGuy, basically everywhere. These days, I'm trying to spend a bit more time on the Mastodons, a lot less so on the Facebooks, Threads, Instagrams, and none at all on that dumpster fire site. And I will catch you all on the next review.